Ruth Baumgardner was a 22-year-old senior at Ohio Wesleyan University in Delaware, Ohio, where she was majoring in art. She was a member of the Delta Delta Delta, or Tri-Delt, sorority. Ruth's sorority sisters would become the last people to ever see her. On the night of May 4th, 1937, Ruth had practice for a singing competition amongst the different sororities on campus with her fellow Tri-Delts at the sorority house. She then returned to her dorm to study for a test she had the following day. In recent letters to her parents, she had written of being tired and overwhelmed. According to Ruth's sorority sisters, however, she seemed in good spirits at singing practice. She was still in a good mood around 11 that night when she stopped in to talk with some of her sorority sisters in the dorm's smoking lounge. Ruth said goodnight to the other Tri-Delts just before midnight. Her hair had already been pinned up in curlers, and she was wearing her pajamas and bathrobe, so they had no reason to believe she was going anywhere else but to bed. The following day, Ruth did not show up for dinner, which was unusual. When her friends and sorority sisters began trying to figure out if anyone had seen her that day, they realized that Ruth had not gone to any of her classes or shown up to take the exam she had been studying for the previous night. At 10:30 p.m., the Tri-Delts notified university officials that Ruth was missing. The university first contacted Ruth's parents to make sure she had not simply returned to her hometown of Lakewood, Ohio. She had not. Her parents were alarmed and traveled to the campus to help look for their daughter. Mrs. Baumgardner went through her daughter's dorm room and determined that the only missing clothing items were a brown suit, hat, and shoes. A recently purchased overnight bag was missing as well. The pajamas and robe Ruth had last been seen wearing were hung up in the room, and her hairpins and curlers had been put away. Ruth's dorm room was room 319, one of the few single rooms in Austin Hall. The room was left perfectly clean and organized, which was apparently not how Ruth usually kept it. Ruth's watch, change purse, and sorority pin had all been left behind. Ruth's key to the room, as well as her identification, was found placed on the back corner of a staircase in Austin Hall, between the second and third floors. Ruth's bright red Dodge convertible, which had been an early graduation gift from her father, was found at the garage where she kept it, with the keys left in the ignition. Ruth's sorority sisters essentially formed their own detective agency, canvassing campus hangouts and questioning taxi drivers and train conductors in the area. Police searched a nearby quarry where Ruth liked to go to study, and a massive ground search covered the campus and the surrounding areas. No further clues were found. Ruth's parents originally feared that she was suffering from amnesia, brought on from all the stress she was under. She had told them that she didn't have enough time to do everything she needed to do and fulfill all of her obligations. Ruth was also concerned that she wouldn't have enough credit hours to graduate on time. She was scheduled to graduate just a few weeks after her disappearance. The possibility that Ruth had been abducted could not immediately be dismissed, however, due in part to the fact that Ruth's father was a wealthy manufacturer, and she disappeared during the Great Depression. If other people on campus were not aware of Mr. Baumgardner's wealth early on in Ruth's time at Ohio Wesleyan, they certainly would have realized it shortly before Ruth went missing, when she brought her brand new convertible to campus. No ransom calls were ever received, however. A witness came forward with an account that could potentially support either of these theories. A woman living near the Olentangy River, not far from the Ohio Wesleyan campus, said that she heard 3 screams sometime between 2 and 3 a.m. on May 5th. This could have been Ruth struggling against an abductor. However, the witness said that the screams sounded like they were coming from a hysterical person, so they could have been coming from Ruth, in the middle of a mental break. In either of these scenarios, it appears that Ruth left her dorm room willingly, as there was no sign of a struggle inside of it. If she had been abducted, her abductor would have needed to lure her outside. In the weeks before she went missing, Ruth had received numerous calls on the dorm's communal phone from an unknown man. On several occasions, other students living in the dorm had answered the phone. They described the man on the other end of the line as having a high-pitched voice. Ruth was not always in the building and available to come to the phone, but she is known to have taken at least 2 of these calls, and seemed happy after speaking to the unknown caller, both times. This, of course, led to speculation that Ruth had run off with a secret boyfriend. Ruth's family and friends rejected this theory because she was happily engaged to a man named Bud Moore back in Lakewood. There were several unconfirmed sightings of Ruth alone in Delaware and other nearby cities in the days after she went missing, but there were also unconfirmed sightings of her hitchhiking with a young man, leaving open the possibility that Ruth had chosen to be with a man her parents may not have approved of and left her life behind to be with him. However, she would have had at most only about $5, roughly $87 in today's money, when she left. Alternatively, she could have thought she was running away with someone she loved, but the person she was meeting actually had criminal intentions. News of Ruth's disappearance spread across the country, and potential sightings of her were called in from seemingly every state. The notoriety of Ruth's case did complicate it because it brought forth leads from people just looking to entangle themselves in the popular news story. At least one woman on the East Coast, and possibly a second, went to the police, falsely claiming to be Ruth. In 1938, Booker Johnson, who was being charged in an unrelated crime, claimed to know what happened to Ruth in a bid to get a reduced sentence. He claimed that he and his 3 co-defendants in the case had picked up Ruth, who had thought she was going out on a date with one of the men. They then drugged her and trafficked her. This story was revealed to be a lie when authorities realized that Johnson and the other 3 men he implicated in his story had all been incarcerated on the day Ruth went missing, and had been for some time prior to it, as well as for some time after it. In 1939, Ruth's parents asked that the official police investigation be closed. This decision opened the Baumgardner family up to suspicion and speculation. Rumors flew that Ruth had been discovered, married to someone of a lower social status, and therefore disowned, or, more popularly, that her parents had her institutionalized for some sort of mental health issue and did not want anyone to find out. In a 1940 article, in which she discussed the toll not knowing where Ruth was continued to have on her parents, Ruth's sister dismissed these allegations. The Baumgardners had hired the Burns Detective Agency to look for Ruth. It is possible that they were simply unhappy with the lack of results in the formal investigation, and did not want police interfering with the investigation of the private detectives. Ruth's mysterious disappearance still remains unsolved. Tricia Reitler was smart, bubbly, and loving. The 19-year-old was a freshman at Indiana Wesleyan University in Marion, Indiana. She was majoring in psychology, hoping to one day help put broken families back together again. March 29, 1993, was an unseasonably warm day in Marion. Tricia, an avid runner, went on 2 separate runs that day to take advantage of the weather. That night, however, was spent writing a term paper in her dorm room. Around 8 p.m., Tricia decided to take a break from her work and walk to Marsh Supermarket, which was just half a mile away. There, she purchased a root beer and a magazine. She then began the walk back to her dorm room in Bowman Hall. She never arrived. Tricia's clothes, stained with blood, were eventually discovered roughly halfway between the store and her dorm building, in a tree in a grassy area. An earring and a small amount of blood was found on a nearby sidewalk. A search was launched to find her, with the effort including fellow students from the university. Search dogs were also brought in to look for Tricia, but Tricia's father, Gary, believes that Tricia's active lifestyle may have rendered the dogs less useful than they ordinarily would have been. Because Tricia ran so frequently, and the search area was so close to where she lived and went to school, her scent was everywhere, because she went for runs all around the area. Investigators believed that 6 or 7 people had been playing basketball on a court near where Tricia went missing, but none of those individuals ever came forward or provided information. The search effort and police investigation did not locate Tricia. Over the years, multiple suspects have been considered in Tricia's disappearance. One of those suspects did confess to involvement in Tricia's case, Larry Dwayne Hall, who is serving life in prison for one crime, but has confessed to 30 others. Most of those confessions were ultimately recanted. I have previously covered Hall in relation to the disappearance of Lori Deppis. Like in Lori's case, Hall had newspaper clippings and notes about Tricia's disappearance in his vehicle. Like in Lori's case, he confessed and offered to tell authorities where she was buried, but a search of that area, in Tricia's case, near a reservoir in Grant County, Indiana, found nothing. Hall later recanted his confession in Tricia's case. In 2017, he admitted to retired Marion police detective J.K. that he made up the confession to get attention. No physical evidence has ever been found to link Hall to Tricia's disappearance. 5 years after Tricia went missing, a red sunset maple tree was planted in her memory in Saybold Park, near where she vanished. To mark the 25th anniversary of her disappearance, a memorial was constructed on the Indiana Wesleyan campus. Tricia's parents and 3 siblings still go out to dinner every year on February 9th to mark Tricia's birthday. While they do not believe that she is alive, they still hope to be able to find Tricia and give her a proper burial, both so that they will have some answers about what happened to her, and so that they will have a place to go to remember her beyond the memorial on campus. By December 22, 1975, most of the students at Illinois State University in Normal, Illinois, had already gone home for winter break. 21-year-old Carol Rolfstad, however, had not yet gone back to her family home in Elk Grove Village, just outside of Chicago. She had a job in a clothing store near campus and wanted to work a few more shifts during the pre-Christmas rush. After work that day, Carol stopped at a bar to meet a friend. They did not stay very long because Carol was traveling back to Elk Grove Village that night. Carol and her friend left the bar together and began walking home. Their routes diverged along the way, with Carol heading to the Delta Zeta sorority house. She never made it inside. The following day, around noon, Carol was discovered unconscious outside of the sorority house, badly beaten. It was estimated that she had been there for 12 hours. She was rushed to the hospital, but passed away the following day, Christmas Eve, due to the head injuries she had sustained. Police could not find an obvious motive. There was still money in Carol's purse, and she had not been sexually assaulted. 2 members of Carol's sorority had been inside the house that night, but reported that they had not seen or heard anything out of the ordinary. An 18-inch-long railroad tie was found near the house, and was hypothesized to be the murder weapon. The sorority house was close to train tracks, so it could have been a weapon of relative opportunity. A witness came forward saying that they had driven by the sorority house around 10 p.m. on the night of December 22nd, and had seen 2 white men, one of whom was carrying a club, outside of it. The witness was able to help develop a sketch of one of the 2 men. They believed him to be between the ages of 18 and 25. Carol's murder was not, unfortunately, her first encounter with violence at the sorority house. On July 16, 1974, at approximately 3 a.m., a man cut the sorority house's phone line and entered the house via a fire escape. He began strangling Carol, but she was able to fight him off enough to get out a scream. He then threw her against a chest of drawers and ran out of the house. Carol suffered a broken nose from being thrown, but was not otherwise seriously injured. She was unable to provide a description of her attacker because it had been dark in her room, and he was never identified. An arrest was made in Carol's case in 1977. The suspect, who had a long history of mental illness, confessed to the crime. However, he later recanted that confession, and the charges against him were dropped. In 2001, evidence from Carol's case was sent to the FBI laboratory for new testing. Fingerprints were discovered on one of the items that had been sent. What that item was exactly has not been publicly disclosed, and the Normal police have only identified it as a personal item that belonged to Carol. The unknown fingerprints did not match any in the FBI database. They were compared to at least one suspect the Normal police were considering, but again, there was not a match. Carol's case remains unsolved, but is still an open investigation.